Hello, this is a video tutorial for Unit 3, Activity 3, and in this activity we're going to focus on character in The Great Gatsby. And so The Great Gatsby has some of the most famous characters in literary history. Daisy and Jay Gatsby and Nick are three of the most famous characters in the last 100 years in literature. And so we're going to take a little bit of a look at each one of them. And to start with Nick, Nick is not only just a character in the story, but he's also the narrator. And what's interesting is he's not telling his own story. He's telling Jay Gatsby's story. And so we have a first-person narrator who is kind of an outsider, who's kind of still telling us what's happening to other people. And that makes the narration and the character of Nick kind of interesting. And it makes us question, how much can we trust Nick? How much does he really know about Gatsby? How much does he really know about Tom and Daisy? When he's reporting these events to us, he's not always even there. And so we have to ask the question, how much can we actually trust Nick Carraway? And so that's a little bit of an insight into Nick's character here. When you look at him and when you pay attention to what he's narrating in the story, I'd like you to think about, do you really trust him? Do you really think he's giving us an accurate picture of what's happening? Secondly, with Daisy, Daisy is a very famous femme fatale. And if you haven't heard that term before, you'll get a little description right here. But she's one of the most famous female characters, really, again, in American literature history. And so I'd like you to think about her and think about her personality. I think that maybe she is more than she seems, and I think that she has more going on in her head than we maybe give her credit for or maybe realize. And so I'd like you to think deeply about Daisy's character as you're reading. And then next, we're going to look at character in a different way. We're going to look at character in terms of hero and anti-hero. And specifically, I'd like you to consider Jay Gatsby. Jay Gatsby is the main character in our story, even though he's not the narrator. And what's interesting is that he's maybe not the traditional good guy. It depends on your personality, and I suppose it depends on your perspective. Some people see him as a hero and really look up to him. And some people, when they read this book, kind of see him maybe not necessarily a bad guy, but maybe someone who is not a traditional hero. So I'd like you to consider the idea of a traditional hero and an anti-hero, specifically when we talk about Jay Gatsby. In one of the assignments in this activity, you're going to be specifically asked to decide whether you think Jay Gatsby is a hero or an anti-hero. So I think we can fairly say that those are our three main characters in the book. We certainly have other important characters that we'll talk about as well. But when we look at Nick, Daisy, and Jay Gatsby, I think there's something interesting we can find in each one of their characters, and there's questions we can ask about whether they're anti-heroes or heroes, whether they're, in the case of Nick, whether we can trust him and whether he's a reliable narrator or not. With that said, there's another way that we're going to look at character, and that's in terms of round, flat, dynamic, static. So the characters in this novel some of them are very complicated and some of them are very simple. And so if we're talking about simple characters that are one-dimensional and kind of stereotypical, we're talking about flat characters. And when we're talking about three-dimensional and complicated characters, we're talking about round characters. So I'm asking you right here, just as you're going through the content here, to think about the characters in the novel, and can you identify one round and one flat character, and can you explain why you think they're round and flat? We're going to go much further with this, and I'm going to ask you to take the 8 main characters in the story and try to decide whether each one of them is round or flat in one of the assignments that we do in this activity. So this is just kind of a practice run here to kind of start thinking about it. Another way that we can look at characters are whether they're dynamic or static. And so a dynamic character learns an important life lesson. that character learns something new about themselves or about the world around them from the beginning to the ending of the story. Whereas a static character does not learn anything new throughout the story. They're the same personality, the same person at the beginning and at the ending of the story. I'm not going to ask you, well, I'll ask you right now, I guess, but I'll ask you, if you can already, to identify one character that you think is dynamic and one character that you think is static. But this question, to be honest with you, is probably better asked at the ending of the novel, after you've really gotten to see the characters from the beginning to the end, and you can kind of tell whether they've learned something or not. Okay, so for our purposes, flat and round are going to be more important for right now. Okay. As always, we've got our chapter questions here, so you can download them, and they look like this. So you've got 8 questions in Chapter 5 and 7 in Chapter 6. So once you read Chapter 5 and Chapter 6, please do answer those questions. As always, you do not have to hand these in to me. They're your best study guide to make sure that you're understanding the novel. Okay, and with that, we're ready to go on to the assignment page. And if we click on assignment here, you'll see that there's 2 assignments in Activity 3. The first assignment is called the Great Gatsby Character Chart. And so I'm going to ask you to download the chart. I'll show you what it looks like here in a second. And I'm going to ask you to fill in the chart. And while you're filling in the chart, what you're going to be doing is describing the 8 main characters in the stories, physical appearances, their personalities, and I'm going to ask you to simplify their personalities into 3 adjectives. So you're going to come up with 3 adjectives that describe each character. And then you've got relationships with other characters on the chart. So as you'll see here, you're going to describe the physical appearance of the 8 characters. I'm asking you to skip Nick because they don't really give physical description of him in the novel. But you're going to physically describe Daisy, Tom, Jordan, Myrtle, George, Jay, and Meyer. So those are our 8 main characters in the book. Then you're going to describe their personalities in 3 adjectives. So just give me 3 words on Nick, 3 adjectives that you think summarize who he is. 3 adjectives on Daisy, 3 on Tom, etc. there. So I'm not asking you to write a whole paragraph here on each character's personality. What I'm asking you to do is to summarize what you think their personality is in 3 words, specifically 3 adjectives. Okay. I'd also like you to identify the characters' relationships with other characters. So what kind of relationship or what connection does Nick have with, say, Daisy and Tom and Jordan? And does he have a connection with any of the characters on the second page here? Myrtle, George, Jay, and Meyer. So you're just going to list for me the different connections that each character has with other characters. And you can use point form. You can use point form for this whole chart if you want, but do give me specific details. Okay. And then the last column, we get back to flat and round here. And I'm going to ask you for each character, for Nick, Daisy, Tom, Jordan, etc. here, to describe each character whether you think they're flat or round and explain why. Okay. So if you think Nick is a flat character, tell me why. If you think Daisy is a round character, tell me why. Okay. And if you actually download the chart here, this is what, this is what it looks like. So it's over 2 pages here. You've got 4 characters on each page, and it looks exactly like it does on the website here. Okay. So once you fill in the chart, you can submit it to the Dropbox as you always do. The second assignment in this activity is our 4th portfolio entry. And so as always, there's no Dropbox here. You're not submitting this. You're saving it with the other portfolio entries that you've already written, and you're going to submit them all together at the ending of the semester. So this question is going to be, consider the definitions of hero and anti-hero. So we already looked at the definitions for those on the content page. And decide, is Jay Gatsby a hero or an anti-hero? And include at least 3 points and 3 specific examples from the book to support your answer. Your response should be a minimum of 10 sentences. And so I always ask for 10 sentences in the portfolio entries. And again, you're going to save it all in one document. Hopefully, you already have portfolio entry 1, 2, and 3. And now you'll have portfolio entry 4. And that's it. If you have any questions about the assignments or about anything in chapters 5 and 6 of the novel, please let me know.